Welcome to Helping Organizations Thrive. To this episode is a special episode. It's my 100th episode on the podcast, and I'm really excited and really pleased I've got so far. I don't think I had the intentions of doing 100, but here we are, a platform to help organizations thrive, bringing on guests with their wisdom and their passion to really share and help people with that. So I am thankful for all those guests. They have showed and poured out huge amounts of wisdom and passion to really help organizations thrive like yourself. And also to the listeners, you're listening and tuning in right now and you download the episodes. I really do appreciate your support. And so to mark this momentous milestone, I've decided to do invite 5 guests back to have a multi-guest show. Probably stretching my capabilities of handling the show, but here we go. But I'm going to hopefully provide you with loads of inspiration and insight to help you your organization thrive. So my first guest is Carey Davis-Munro. Welcome back, Carey.
Oh, it's fantastic to be here, Julian. I'm really privileged and delighted to be a part of the 100th show with you today.
Well, it's good that you came back. I think you were on might have been the second or third episode right back when you believed that this could go somewhere. That was 18 months ago. So I really appreciate you're back here today. I'll just let the audience know that you're an organization well-being, food and behavioral coach, and also the author of the book Eat, Nourish, Flourish. So what we've been looking at is well-being. Well-being's been a topic I know is very close to your heart. I think if I break you in two, you'd be well-being running through you. But it's also been a topic over the last 2 years of this pandemic, in a good way and in a bad way. And so I wanted just to give some thought to what you've observed in the last 2 years from a organizational point of view and from a well-being point of view.
Yeah, I mean, if I used to talk about well-being needing to be top of the agenda 5 years ago, my goodness me, in the last 2 years, am I talking about it needing to be top of the agenda? I'm lucky enough to go into a variety of organizations, in size, number of different demographics. And, there's a context, Julian. The last 2 years have been exceptionally different and difficult for so many people. And organizations have had to adapt and are having to adapt and will have to adapt around that. Because, when I speak to people, and the same as you, when we coach people one-to-one, when I go and do group training or group coaching, I am seeing that people are fragile. We've had over 2 years now of us almost being in the equivalent of an abusive relationship where we're told we can do things, we can't do things. We're allowed to go places, we're not allowed to go places. And people have had to draw on all of their resilience in order to even sort of keep going. And something I discuss a lot with Will Murtha, who I do some sessions with, we've seen something called a trauma brain or post-pandemic stress disorder, whereby people are exhibiting lots of the symptoms. If you look up PTSD as a 17 symptom readout, even the most resilient of people are exhibiting some of those symptoms. And that is because we have been through this, quite ridiculous time where we have literally not been able to come inside and control what we can control. We've been pulled in different directions.
It's interesting to frame it as that PTSD, actually, because I think we've all been through some traumatic thing, a small way, big way. And it's not just about your restrictions, but it's just that whole, I guess, mental health and the expectation to be resilient and all these things we keep throwing onto people, actually framing like that, because it's been going on for a long time. We're coming up 2 years.
A long, long time. And you know what? I'm going to read you something which I think is really apt. This is the Workplace Health Report 2022. These are the stats. Half of all workers feel fatigued. 25 to 34 are disproportionately affected by anxiety and depression. Female employees are 3 times more likely to seek mental help. Over half of employees are experiencing musculoskeletal pain, and 94%, this is what employers should be listening to, 94% of employees are motivated to make a change. So people have had enough, Julian. One good thing this pandemic has done is the sort of this abusive situation has caused people to question where they are and to realize that actually in workplaces, in relationships, wherever they are in life, in their different points of life and different aspects of life, to make some changes. So they've had enough of the narrative, they've had enough of the hypocrisy, and we are seeing this filtered down into different areas of their life. And it's caused people to question what they do and why they do it. So amidst this disillusionment is this unrest bubbling, and this real need for change.
So on the backdrop of that, and it's a great sort of setup really in terms of the context we're in, if you're leading an organization now, and I'm not just talking the sort of the transactional aspects of well-being, what sort of, and that's not putting the fruit out and the gym membership. Okay, that's okay. I feel that's really transactional. And for me, I think what's taught me about this whole pandemic is to do things more transformational and significant changes that are not just adaptions. Let's go beyond adaption. So as a leader now in an organization, what considerations we should be thinking about to, I guess, look after the well-being of our staff? Because we know we look after the well-being of our staff, then it will start to drive productivity and therefore deliver sales and profits and everything else that comes with that.
Yeah, well, we know that employees who feel absolutely cared for at work are more than 3 times likely to be happy at work. So that translates directly into the bottom line. And I don't feel any longer that we're having conversations with leaders to say, look, and explain what this does. I believe leaders now know, although I'm asked to provide the return on investment, etc. But we know the sort of likelihood has increased over 35%, through this pandemic. So when we see what's happening in the circles of, I call, sort of out of our control, whatever our government are doing, saying, and we know that there's such hypocrisy, what they want from their leaders is the opposite. They want strong, honest, and open leadership. They want clear communication. They want sensitivity. My goodness me, we've been through so much. People have been through so much. They need leaders to be sensitive to them, and they need to be listened to. So a well-being program isn't, as you say, just implementing this quickly, that quickly, getting this in, getting that. It's a comprehensive strategic approach that needs to be brought in. And it encompasses the culture of that organization, Julian, because all of us are not only thinking about how we work right now, but we're thinking about why we work. And if employers aren't thinking about this, it's called the Great Reshuffle. That's what the data is showing us. And people are not fulfilled. So this is what I would say would be the top things. They have to replace this sort of work hard, hustling, work late culture that we've seen over the last 10 to 15 years with a strategic and comprehensive well-being and cultural strategy, which filters down into every single area of HR. And my background is HR. It has to filter into everything from recruitment to that leaving interview, so that we understand the full picture and can get a full temperature of what's going on within that organization. I was going to say, within LinkedIn, they've been doing a real insight piece into what's going on. And they said on LinkedIn, members change jobs 54% more year on year. So employees are in the driver's seat. So first of all, replace that work hard culture with honest, open communication and linking things like diversity inclusion is coming up top at the moment, Julian. So that has to be incorporated into those 7 dimensions of well-being.
And it's interesting on that work hard sort of play hard mindset, which is just a nonce really, is I've been talking to a lot of organizations about getting more about, forget about productivity in a sense, look about results based. If somebody can do something in 6 hours, then great. Why should they have to stay to 8, 9, 10 hours? That's brilliant. Look for the result, look for the outcome. And, just as you and I, when we go into organizations, we're based on our outcomes, on our results.
Absolutely.
Not how many hours we work or anything else. And it's just shifting that mindset, isn't it? What are you trying to get out of this individual in terms of what is the result? What's the KPI? If it's measurable, just focus on that. Don't worry about how they're going to do it. Obviously support them and obviously don't create a structure that's all about working hard, but actually make it results based.
Absolutely. And trust people. We are going back to this, my point 3 here, and what should be the focus in 2022. Leaders should think about upgrading the hybrid workplace. That's listening to people. Oh, my goodness me, they went from working in an office to working at home from day to day. Trust them to get the job done. Then if they don't, manage it. But my goodness me, we've got to listen to people and what they want out of this hybrid working, because they've proved they can work at home. You can't just force people back into situations where you can, but you will lose out. And when we did force people back in September, there was an absolute spike in burnout and a dip in happiness, the data shows, Julian. So from September to now, there's been a difference. And that's because we've had to go back to this more of a, work from home environment. So leaders need to hear that and also think about the internal mobility and transformation, moving the talent around an organization. This comes out as top for leaders in 2022 to really understand how to grow people, how to restructure your organization to facilitate the well-being that relies on people's growth and their mindset, and being motivated, Julian, and happy to work for that business.
Yeah, and it comes down to this style of leadership, whether it's elements of role modeling, which is really important because obviously that sort of demonstrates what we're expectations, but that whole listening. If I was to ask you just before we close, I know this has gone really short, Carey, because we're getting 10 minutes or so of each inspiration. If I was to ask you, what one word would describe the future of 2022 or the expectations? Just to give an example, my word is agility. I think this year is all about being agile, not about resilience, it's all about being agile and moving around and allowing people to really go after things really quickly. What would be your word in the context of what you operate in?
I guess, apart from well-being, obviously, I guess for people, what I'm seeing, as I said, this is the great reshuffle. People are no longer just thinking about how they work, but why they work. So my word would be fulfillment. People aren't happy just to be any longer. They're looking for fulfillment and looking for a better way of life, whether that's through health, whether that's through work, well-being, but fulfillment.
Brilliant. I like that. That's a really good word, actually. That really sums it up. Well, thank you so much for coming back. Thank you for your wisdom. Pleasure. Thank you for packing so much in, as you always do. And I will see you another time, I'm sure.
Yeah, wonderful to be with you today, Julian. Thank you so much for having me back.
Thank you, Carey. Thank you. And now I would like to, as smoothly as that was done, I'm almost impressed with myself, Mark. Welcome, Mark Roberts, to the conversation. Good to see you, Mark.
Good to see you. Congratulations on your 100th episode.
Thank you. Much appreciated. And thanks for you for being on the early episodes, the ones who sort of believed in me and took a punt, as it were, and came along, which is great. I'll just tell the audience a little bit about you again, just to sort of get people up to speed with you. You help business leaders improve sales results, and you're in essence a business development coach. You work and to help businesses grow from a sales perspective. And I just want to, and we're going from different topics here, from well-being now to more sort of sales, but it's all understanding what's going on in a business and how we can help organizations thrive. I'd like to get your thoughts, Mark, in terms of what have we learned about how customers have changed over the last sort of couple of years. What's your understanding? What's your insights and your experience of that?
Well, again, thank you for having me on. And part of our practice is we do voice of customer research. And what we're finding is, customers are not wanting what we've traditionally had, which is the salesperson that is the expert in just product and application. What they want is that trusted advisor, that's somebody who, can share things that is not on a website. And the burden is on us in sales as sales leaders to help equip and empower our teams to have those conversations. The data is also showing, which a lot of marketers will not like, is there's been a shift from brand loyalty to efficiency. We've seen a tremendous amount of disruption in supply chain, And that's also impacting buyer decisions. And once fiercely loyal buyers to specific brands are now being introduced to brands out of necessity that are okay. They're doing the job. So, your prior guest talked about the great reshuffle. We're seeing a reshuffle in how buyers buy.
And where are you getting this data from? Where's your data source?
We do voice of customer research for our clients. We interview our clients, customers, anywhere from 100 to 200. One project, we interviewed 1,200 of their customers, and we asked them very specific questions. As you can imagine, everybody listening can say their business changed a lot in the last 2 years. But what about your customers? How has their business changed? And that's what people are hiring our team to answer for them. And we ask a lot of things about customer satisfaction, how they shop, why they shop, what buyer criteria are they looking for. Interesting, in Net Promoter Score, something you might find interesting, the leading indicator on whether or not they would refer your company to another company is your culture.
Interesting. And it's interesting because I think customers are looking on their suppliers, as you say, not just from can they supply me this and do it in a good time, a good cost. They're actually going up the chain a bit more about your culture, your ethical stance, your environmental, the whole host of stuff going on, isn't there, in terms of people exploring and mining for more information. Is this a credible organization to work with?
Well, we're seeing, I think it was a Harvard report that 45% of buyers are struggling with supply chain right now. So it's not surprising they're investigating new companies, new sources. But what is surprising when we look at the data is how much they're investigating, not just the company, but they're going onto LinkedIn and they're seeing, do I even want to work with this individual? They're actually going to Glassdoor. What have past employees said about working with this company? It's pretty fascinating to see, what they're looking for is that trusted relationship, somebody that they can count on, somebody that'll give them insights, somebody that'll help their bottom line. And teams that haven't adjusted to that new need are kind of on the outside looking in. They're just pitching. So again, there's been a pretty big shift. Just like what we talked about, I think on a phone call recently, the shift in how we lead our teams has changed. You figure millennials now are 40. Boomers like me, we continue to, get older and older. But what the millennials are expecting, not wanting, but expecting, is a coach, not a manager.
Yeah.
So what's kept my practice very busy is helping sales leaders evolve from being sales managers to being coaches. And it's not something that we were ever taught. So it is trainable. But if we don't, you're going to see your employees become disengaged and leave.
Yeah, and it's interesting because obviously I'm getting more users as obviously I'm a coach, but also we're just going back to that point of the whole transparency piece, where more and more people are going to LinkedIn before they engage with a supplier to find out more about their people and what they're posting, and that's a whole personal branding. I know it's a bit of a cliche thing about personal branding, but actually it's really important, isn't it? Because it's the whole piece now people are looking at. It's not just your website, it's not just the conversation you're having. Actually, the way we portray ourselves on social media has an impact, doesn't it? Whether we do it in a fake way or in a real way, but whatever we put out there will have an impact, won't it?
Well, it's critical. And, we need to make sure that our employees understand that. When I work with different teams, different age groups, the younger employees, the millennials, they totally understand the need for social. How they're portrayed socially, though, they need to be coached. How they take stance on particular issues. And then also, how do they reinforce their brand on who they want to be known as on LinkedIn? But buyers are reading all these things. So, the best advice in the world is probably one you would give your, 13-year-old child, which is don't ever put anything out there that could be used against you, right? But put things out there that reinforce who you are. People still want to work with people, even if we're working virtually. I think it was a McKinsey study that said 83% of decision makers said we expect virtual human-to-human interaction to continue. So we need to adapt. How do we build relationships virtually? How do we, nurture those relationships virtually with our customers, but also with our teams?
So as we look forward in this sort of 2022 and thinking about leaders of organizations, what's your one sort of thought or strategy they should be employing to help, I suppose, their sales department to think more about their customer and start to help grow their business in this sort of new context?
My first advice would be understand your current state. Chances are the leadership team already has their plan for 2022. And the challenge, though, is a lot of times I see very frustrated senior leaders after a year wondering what happened. We had a great plan. Assess your team. Where are they strong? Where are there some gaps that maybe could prevent them from executing your plan? And then close those gaps. You can do that with, assessing your team, but you can also do it with voice of customer research. Make sure that your strategy is in alignment with how your customers want to be treated. So I'm known as the data-driven sales guy. Start with the data. Don't let bias, don't let, how we've always done things around here, how my grandfather did things in our business sway you. There's plenty of data out there. And if you don't have it, get it. And then make your plans based on data, not on gut and intuition anymore.
That's really good advice. I think a lot of salespeople in the past have been very much in the moment type of thinking, as opposed to data-driven and insight-driven. I think it's important in this day and age to be because there's so much out there to get hold of data. You do surveys, but in terms of lots of organizations do lots of data capture that can really help organizations to be more agile in terms of the organization, how they go through in terms of from a sales perspective. Thank you for coming back, Mark. I really appreciate it. Always valuable have your insights. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And again, I look forward to being on your 200th episode.
Steady on now. Right. I will now swiftly change you from you to Cheryl now. So I'm going to bring Cheryl Dixon on. Good afternoon or good morning to you, Cheryl.
Good morning, Julian. Happy 100.
Thank you very much. Yes, who could have believed it? I'd get this far. I didn't anyway. So it's good. Thank you for coming back. Really do appreciate it. So I'm just going to tell the audience again to refresh people. You had an episode a while back now, but you are a communication strategy consultant. You're an expert in internal and external communication, along with crisis and corporate communication. So you're all things communication. If I think of the word communication, I think of you. That's what you do, and you're very good at it. And I remember we had a very good conversation last time. So it'd be interesting. We've had an interesting 2 years, and we know communication's been vital for lots of changes, lots of uncertainty, and hybrid, remote working, a whole host of stuff been going on, and it's all a bit of a all up in the air. And some people have communicated well, some haven't, and not so well. I just wanted to capture your thoughts on the last 2 years in terms of what you've observed, what you've picked up and thought that's really interesting, or that's not so good, and just your thoughts really.
Sure. In the past 2 years, it's kind of like we don't know where to look first. I think that, I've heard a lot of conversation already this morning about the importance of well-being. And I think that that is absolutely, on everyone's minds and should be on leaders' minds. But if you look at all of the factors that are influencing how leaders need to communicate internally, as well as their expectations of communicating externally. So we're looking at a couple of different buckets that we need to be very cognizant of. One is certainly, managing the remote work environment and managing and driving culture. I think it was someone else mentioned this morning about the importance of Glassdoor and people researching companies. If you're not watching what's being said on Glassdoor, if you're not watching and observing and being very acutely aware of what's going on in your organizations and your culture, you're missing the mark. We're also looking at leaders that are increasingly being expected to comment or have a position or presence on governmental issues or societal issues, whether they're making they're taking a stand or mentioning just their vision, their expectations for DE&I, or just even something having nothing to do with their company. And then finally, the way that crises and issues are just hitting companies one after the other. I mean, it's such a volatile environment. Preparing for and expecting the unexpected has just never been more important.
Yeah, and it's interesting the cultural piece. We know that culture is important in an organization. We know creating the right culture and the right environment. And we've all been flung around the world and home, hybrid, and it's still a bit quite tricky. I deal with a lot of organizations, certainly when they're growing. How do you maintain that culture? But how do you do that in the context we're in? And what's your experience? What are your thoughts on from a communication point of view to drive that? Because it's really important, but it can be quite tricky when it's not as tangible as it used to be, is it? It's a lot more fluid.
It is a lot more fluid. And, I go back to the importance of listening. And, Carey said that earlier this morning, that, there really needs to be a very personal hands-on touch with what's going on in the organization. There needs to be a communication flow up to leaders as well as that communication flow down. I think that we've had practice already in understanding the importance of and communicating the why. Another brilliant thought from, I think it was Carey this morning, not just how we work, but why we work. The next generation of workers, they're expecting the why. They want to be part of it. They want to understand their part to the whole. So we should have already had some practice. But in terms overall of culture and the importance of communication, I think that we're at a disadvantage, but also we have a bit of an advantage with virtual. There was we need to also think about the channels in which we're communicating. And there was a recent Ipsos culture report that was evaluating the different channels that leaders used and the believability for employees. And I've never been a fan of recorded videos. They're too produced. They're too stoic. They don't allow for engagement back and forth. And those are kind of viewed as less effective. I think that personal visits as best you can, small group chats, Zoom, as long as you're not firing 900 people over Zoom.
Yes.
That's a big oopsie. But using that advantage of a little more informal ways of working and making sure that there's just just like a customer service environment, it's high touch.
Yes, and I guess rather than looking at it either in terms of the challenges we've had, what can you see? And you've touched on some of the benefit. What other benefits have we transitioned to? Because it's almost been a bit of a reset on the world and how we work, how we operate. And rather than us looking back how it used to be, this is how it is. And what are the ways that we can embrace it and really make the most of it? This sort of reset, this transition, this step change in organizations to really be even more incredible in terms of how we communicate our culture, our plans, and our strategies. What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. Well, I think, communication is only as good as the actual actions and beliefs and foundation that we're communicating about. So, there was talk earlier, a lot of attention about well-being. And I think that, as a culture and as a business culture, we are given more permission. There's the expectation, but more permission to really care about and talk about well-being and what that means for employees across the board and globally. In my class at Columbia, I was teaching communications and global brands, and that came up a lot this past semester. And we were talking about what well-being and what societal priorities impact companies around the world. It might be different from a company that's based in the US and based abroad. But and there was another interesting study from Towers Watson. I think it was the different facets of well-being. And we're looking at, emotional well-being, the physical well-being, taking care of our employees and their new needs, the mental health, and taking care of your mental health. Self-care is, I think once stigmatized, and now it really is brought to the forefront. And then social and financial. So how are we really taking care of our people? Are we doing it authentically? And are we giving a genuine effort to support them?
And I guess what you're saying there is that actually it's not almost what we're communicating and how we're communicating. It's where where the source of it, or where the well of that communication, isn't it? In terms of, is it from a well-being culture? Is it from a certain beliefs, certain characteristics that make it impactful and important? I guess that's what we're talking about here, aren't we?
Sure. Well, you can have a charismatic leader and a communication expert that can put lipstick on a pig. You can put window dressing and spin a story on anything, but you're going to get found out. I think that, there's so much more transparency. There's an expectation of authenticity that's not going to work anymore. So well-produced statements, well-polished leaders that are saying, reading from a script that either their communications leaders or human resources leaders are telling them to say. But if that's not backed up and that's not believed throughout the organization, the employees are the most important brand ambassadors and the most credible brand ambassadors. So a leader could be saying one thing, the employees can be saying another, and there you have this disconnect and discord. So it truly does need to be from the bottom up as well as from the top down.
Okay, and so taking that as a leader now, if I was thinking, how am I going to go forward this year? How am I going to go about my communication? What are your thoughts on that? And what are your, I suppose, advice if you're advising a leader in terms of helping them lead in this very new context than it was 2 years ago?
Yeah, a great question. I've worked with different clients at different stages of their sophistication in their communications planning. Leaders that have not done this before, we kind of need to start at the beginning, and we're establishing a foundation of that trust and credibility and a cadence of regular communication. It's so important that that trust is there. So, if you look at Edelman's Trust Barometer over the past couple of years, even more now, I think they just released a study recently that their employees are still trusting their own leaders and CEOs more than any other source. So, with that power comes great responsibility. There's that very famous and very true quote that they have a responsibility to be a source of information and a source of comfort and news and direction for their employees. So back to your question, it depends on where we're starting from. I've advised leaders that we need to just start a cadence because it just hasn't been done before. And leaders that have a bit of cadence and have a bit of practice in communicating to their organizations, then we can get a little more sophisticated and look at what are the priorities, what do employees need to know, what do we want them to know, and where is something in the middle where there's that gray area where we really need to do a lot of listening. And it's not just employees, it's all of the other stakeholders. So internal and external stakeholders. So what do they need to know? What do they want to know? What do we want them to know? And what's going to be important?
Yeah, I think often we focus so much on the employees, which is important too, but actually, just as Mark was saying, we need to think about those people external, which are our customers, and what are they thinking? What we're saying to them? How are we interacting with them as well, isn't it?
Well, it's not just customers. It's B2B. It's people that do business with your company. It's the court of public opinion. It's media. We have opinions on businesses and leaders, whether we do business with them or not. And reputation and how a company behaves is more and more tied to its value, monetary value, what a company's worth, what a brand is worth. There's more companies, more and more, that are producing CSR reports. And that is absolutely considered when analysts are looking at the true monetary value of a company. And now you're looking at in the war for talent and the great reshuffling or resignation, or people finding more opportunities to work where they really feel that a company aligns with their values. So there's monetary value, there's qualitative and quantitative value in all of that.
And just going back to, you said before about the whole having an opinion on societal issues. How do, I guess, organizations handle that? Because some of them are quite tricky and very difficult to handle, aren't they? And, whether that was, Black Lives Matter, there's been other issues and other things that have come into the sort of media, and how we embrace that. What do you do? I mean, I guess I know it's different for each situation, but what's your sort of general, I guess, advice with that? Because I think it's quite a challenge.
It is quite a challenge. And, the big answer is it depends. It depends on what the expectations are, and it depends on what platform do you have, and do you have any business talking about these societal issues, and to what extent. Again, going back to big voices, big leaders, they're looked to as influencers. So there's more of an expectation for very visible leaders of very big companies with deep pockets to take a stand on societal issues. But even smaller organizations that are not very visible, there's an expectation within their own company on especially DE&I and taking care of employees. I think that my biggest piece of advice for companies and leaders looking at how do I either align myself with a cause, or how do I handle corporate social responsibility, when do I get involved, when do I say something, is, does it make sense? Do I have a history of talking about this topic? Does the topic really resonate with my company? And does it make sense, and what need does it serve? So again, there's a difference with being very vocal externally as well as vocal internally. And then also, does that leader's vision, mission, and stance align with the company's values and its customer values? We've seen some leaders take a complete departure and be very vocal about either their political ideology or any societal issue that actually is at odds with what their company stands for and what their customers expect. And you've seen customers revolt. And then you'll see companies kind of try to distance themselves from the personal beliefs of the leaders. Then you'll see leaders that actually do a very good job in making sure that they embody the values of their company, and everything they do is in alignment. So making sure that you're aligned, making sure that you understand what your customers, your employees, and all your different stakeholders need, want, and expect.
Well, that was went from a depends to real sound advice there. So I thought that was really helpful, Cheryl.
Good.
Good. So if I was to ask you one word for you that would describe, or you'd want to describe 2022, what would it be?
Oh boy. My crystal ball is on my other shelf. I mean, I think, it's so, I think agility was, the word that Mark used. I think it's a good one. Being nimble. Let's see, hold on. Hold on to your chair. And, I think, you're asking the communications expert to come up with one word, and I just can't. It really is, be aware and be nimble, be able to pivot. When you asked about communications planning, I'm in the midst of working with leaders or several of my clients for communications planning for the year, with the caveat of this is wonderful. This might look completely different next month. So we need to be able to check in and revisit those priorities, reprioritize, and even some grandiose plans that are set in the beginning, we might be trashing them next quarter. So, yeah.
Brilliant. I like that.
I completely botched that one word, but hopefully.
No. Many words are good there. Agility and that sort of being nimble. I suppose it's that sort of being fluid, I guess, isn't it? It's that sort of expectation. We've got to remain fluid as things still pan out.
Absolutely.
And that's what's taught me in the last sort of 2 years. Well, thank you for your time today, Cheryl. Much appreciated.
Oh, it's so great to be back, and can't wait for your 200.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Bye. Well, another one. Welcome, Con. Coach Con.
Happy centennial, Julian. Happy centennial.
Thank you very much. Good to have you back.
Good to be back.
Yes, it's I'm trying to managing everything here, but yes, I'm all right. I'm doing okay. There we go. Good to have you back, and I thank you for coming back. And I'm just going to tell the audience a little bit, get back up to speed who you are. You're an author. You're an award-winning coach, in-person and virtual facilitator results, and you help individuals and organizations navigate change and achieve their performance goals. So I know last time we spoke about navigating through uncertainty, which feels like a long time ago, but we're still navigating uncertainty, I think. I think that's what seems to be the thing. And I guess, I suppose, what are your observations? And I suppose it's a bit based on your own sort of LinkedIn feed, really. What are your observations on, I guess, the whole talent perspective of, what's been going on in the last 2 years and how we're managing the uncertainty with talent? What have you noticed in the last couple of years?
Okay, well, let's unpack that, because that's a pretty interesting question. There's a lot of different ways we could go. Let me start with one way. The pendulum has swung. We know that periodically the pendulum swings in one way or the other, meaning that the power of decision making flows from the employer to the employee periodically, and it goes back and forth. During the start of the pandemic, early on in 2020, we saw that many organizations were making, as one of your previous guests said it, data-driven decisions. And they made some calculations and said, you know what, we either have to let go, release, furlough, separate somehow, and reduce our payroll costs. And those were decisions that were made based on the data, based on what their business priorities were at the time. And I think what they're realizing now is, as the shift is going the other way, as the pendulum has swung the other way now, and employers are ready to restart, reboot, and get back into business, they expect all of a sudden those thousands of people that were released to automatically march back in and just take up their cubes in their offices again, as if nothing has happened in that time period. And it's just not happening. We saw that repeatedly in our own lives. Your guests previously have mentioned it. We're seeing this prolonged switch, and people are questioning, why am I here? What am I looking for? What is the purpose? And according to an interesting Harvard Business Review study, it says that the demographic group, that age group in their prime right now, that 30 to 45 year range, which are at their employment prime, if you will. They have enough maturity. They're in that mid-level place where they want to grow and expand and contribute, are the ones that are being impacted the most right now, in the sense that they are the ones that are resigning. They are the ones that are feeling and realizing that they have the ability to pick and choose where they go. And that's a huge shift in the power dynamics from that piece. So that's
is that sort of revelation? Obviously, we've all taken some time to reflect more, downtime, flexible working, everything else. Are people discovering their purpose? Is that what it is? Do you think it's that, or is it more than that?
I think there's a big part of that, because if you can't help but a world-changing event like the one that we've been experiencing the last 2 years, is going to make you question things. It's going to make you question what really matters to you, with the toll in human lives, with the toll in financial impact. There are crises all over the place in the form of mental illness, emotional discomfort from all of those things. One thing is piling on top of the other, and people are standing back because they have time to think about it, or they've had time over the past year or two to look back and say, okay, what am I doing here? What am I really here for? Is this all there is? And they're trading in their badges of burnout and working 100+ hours a week and saying, I don't want to work that hard. That's not what I'm here for. Their life is too short. And it's really making them realize, stop and look and say what's going on. Somehow this great pause has stopped this hamster wheel, and people are stopping, and for the first time in a long time, looking around and saying, why am I here? What am I doing?
No, it's interesting, isn't it? And I think, Carey mentioned her word was fulfillment. I think people are looking for fulfillment now in their sort of their day job, their work they do. They want to be fulfilled. It's more than just getting paid and having sick pay and benefits and that. It's, I want fulfillment.
Yeah. And study after study is showing that, Julian. And as I work with my clients, I'm realizing that there is truth to a lot of these numbers in the work that we're doing right now. Up to this point, I mean, my shift has been, my focus has been, as things have progressed, to really help organizations make sure that they have that pipeline, that stable of ready leadership talent to fulfill their strategies. Right now, this has left organizations in a situation where they're realizing that without the people, without the talent to execute their strategy, it's just a paper exercise. They really can't go anywhere. Many organizations, many businesses, smaller ones, are closing down because they can't staff their operation. They don't have people to stay open. When my bank reaches out to me and said, hey, just be aware that sometimes during lunch we may be closed, or there may be just one person inside and you have to drive through because we can't operate the lobby anymore. We don't have enough people. When there's 10 million openings for 7 million unemployed in the United States, and that number is relative in other parts of the world where you are, in the EU and everywhere else, I'm seeing similar things. And there are openings. It's not like we don't have jobs for people, but people are looking for that fulfillment.
So if you're an organization right now and you want to remain at the forefront, you want to compete for talent, knowing this fulfillment has become quite a thing, more so than it was previously. How do we embrace that? How do we, I guess, practically work it in our organization that will attract talent? Because obviously we know that everybody can't be completely fulfilled in their work. There's other things outside that. But so what can we do as organizations to help that fulfillment aspect?
Well, what I've been working on as consulting and coaching with my clients is focus on what does that fulfillment and work mean. And in many ways, we use the term engagement. We use the term engagement as a measurement, as a reference to how we can fulfill a lot of the needs of our staff, a lot of our workforce needs. And when you look at that, there are four main drivers in that area, Julian. The first and foremost one is feeling valued. As a member of a team, you want to feel valued. You want to know where you fit into this picture. You want to know that, you know what, it matters whether I'm here or not. And we can do that. Leaders can do that, can reach out one-on-one or in personal aspects. Cheryl mentioned it earlier, our communication expert, and said, you know what, whether you're doing it when you have the opportunity to meet face to face, whether you're doing it through Zoom or other means, reach out to people. Be authentic. And here's where you and I have talked about the leadership paradox, because that's another thing that leaders need to realize. When you're expressing that value, you need to embrace that leadership paradox, meaning that you can no longer afford to be this or that. You have to be both. You have to be empathetic on one hand and understand where your people are in the given moment. People are still reeling from this. It's not like all of a sudden, like Jamie Dimon said, I can't wait for us to get back to normal. It's not going back to that normal that we knew before. So we have to be empathetic and understand that people still have fears. They're agonizing over things. They're feeling the impact of that, the pandemic fatigue and everything else. So be empathetic. But on the other hand, focus on tough love. Be in a situation where your team expects you to be able to set the healthy boundaries, don't let them have to decide what to work on. Help them prioritize, help them look at their work differently and say, you know what, Julian, I don't need you working at 2 o'clock at night after you put the kids to bed, because you're going to burn out. This is a long haul. This isn't even a marathon. It's an ultra marathon. You and I have talked about that concept. It's been going on for a long time, and it still will continue longer. So we got to embrace that. Empathy, tough love. We got to look at things and say, okay, high tech, we have the technology now to be able to do a lot of work. But how do we embrace that higher human touch? Be authentic. Reach out and say, hey, Julian, how are you really doing? No. Don't just brush it off. How are you really doing? And have those personal moments. Use the technology to make it even more personal from that piece and understand how to connect. So feeling valued, that's the one piece that we want to make sure our people have, Julian. The second piece is use that same technology and that concept of personal high human touch to help people be connected, not just to you, but to the rest of the team. How can we establish those? Because the more we make sure that people feel connected, the greater the chance of them to stay with us, to be engaged, to fulfill their job. People that feel connected are 8 times more likely to stay and contribute from that piece. These are numbers that are real. I mean, when you look at it, do I have a good friend? Do I have a support system in my work network? How can I help with that? So that is big. The next thing is contributing. Do people feel like they're contributing? Do they feel like they're making a difference, or are they just out there somewhere on their own? So when we look at that, as leaders, what can we do? Make sure that you have very tangible pieces that people can feel that they can succeed with. Give them their priorities. Give them manageable parts of the work. No longer manage based on how many hours have you been in front of your computer, Julian, but rather, what did you get done? You've mentioned it even today, results-based work. How can I feel like I'm contributing because I can check something off? We all love to check things off our list. We all like to feel like we're making a difference. And when we do make a difference, let people know. Don't worry about exit interviews. Worry about stay interviews. Get together with people and talk to them about what matters to them. And the final part is, we've seen this over and over again, even last year in 2021 and even before most of 2020. People shifted their focus to learning and growing. They realized that they may have to retool. We all did. And this downtime was a great opportunity for us to continue to grow. Companies have the opportunity now to continue, whether it's on the job, whether it's through mentoring and coaching, to connect people to others in the organization, or formal training like the workshops that we do, Julian, and giving people the opportunity to grow, because when they can see a career path within the organization, they can feel more engaged, they can feel more fulfilled. These are 4 keys, 4 simple things, not easy, but simple things that leaders can do today to move forward with that.
Yeah, and it just, you mentioned about that sort of being valued and connected, and some of the thoughts that came out of that for me was that creating a sort of psychological safe environment as well, where people feel they can contribute, they can challenge, they can learn, they can make mistakes, it's okay to fail, and I think that's really important as well. It's creating that environment that people feel they can really expand themselves and not be mocked or made a fool of if they do make a mistake or be sacked or whatever it may be.
Yeah. And that's the time when look at it over time, Julian, if I may interject for a second. I mean, what are we dealing with? We're dealing with a big, huge shift and transition. We've gone through the grieving piece early on, and sometimes we still go through that, the loss of our old life. We're in that middle stage still, that prolonged middle stage right now where we're transitioning before we get to that next normal. Now is the time to allow for experimentation, for risk taking, to give people permission to fail as they try to explore new ways of doing things, because we're all in the same boat. If there was ever a time for us to experiment with that risk taking was within the boundaries, now's that time.
Absolutely. And as we look out in this year, and we know there's still uncertainties, it's there, it is, and we've sort of got used to it. But what advice would you give to a leader right now, and they're trying to recruit people, keep people on board? What would be your, with this uncertainty of business, uncertainty of customers, uncertainty of government imposing various things? What would be your sort of advice on that?
It would be, again, engage them in the solution. You don't have as a leader, I mean, we're all updating our playbook right now, our leadership playbook. And that's where the paradox come in. That's where all of these ideas come in. But leaders have to accept that they don't have all the answers right now. The answers may lie with their people. Embrace that. Engage them in solution finding. When people feel like they are engaged in the solution finding, when they feel like they're part of that, they can contribute in that way and engage, they can help shape the future of what's happening. They don't have to sit around and wait for us to do something to them. We need to do something with them. And that's the big key right now.
Yeah, engagement. I like that. And just before we finish with you, Con, what one word would describe this year for you, or you'd like it to be this year? One word.
If I was to limit it down to one word, it would be embrace. Embrace the uncertainty. Embrace the expectations. Embrace the challenges. Embrace all of those things, and embrace the partnerships that we can work together.
Excellent. I really like that. Thank you very much for being on today. Thank you for coming back. Short but very sweet. Really appreciate that.
Happy 100, and I look forward to the next 100, my friend.
Brilliant. Thank you, Con. Appreciate that.
Take care.
Bye. Welcome, Jim.
Hey, Julian. Congratulations, man. Happy 100.
Thank you. Good to have you on, Mr. Kerr. It's always good to have you on. You're the finale now, Jim. So no sort of expectations or challenge there for you, but you are the finale of this. Yes, it's been good.
I usually am.
I'll just let the audience just get up to speed again with who you are. You help leaders make change happen. You're a management consultant and you're a leadership coach, and you've written numerous books on leadership. One which is behind you, The Indispensable, Being Indispensable. And you came on, I think, probably over a year ago now since I last spoke to you. So I'd like to get your thoughts on the last 2 years. Just, what have you picked up? What sort of trends and what I guess what positive trends have emerged from in a leadership context over the last couple of years?
Well, one of the things that I'm finding now is rather than kind of looking backwards and saying, oh, wow, we've had to get over a lot. We've had to persevere. We've had to be empathetic. We've had to learn how to work remotely. All that stuff is given. What I'm trying to do is look forward. What do leaders, top leaders, need to be worrying about as they look into 2022 and beyond? And there's a few things that I think are key, and there are things that I'm not seeing people write about so much. So I'm thinking that I may just tackle some of that stuff in my writing this year. And I'm already seeing clients call and talk to me about these things. So I think there's some interest there. And that includes stuff like what I guess I would call the pandemic dividend. There were companies that were very successful and grew astronomically over the last couple of years. And they've got a huge head start for anybody, competing with them. So what are you going to do to catch up? Where's the strategy? What's the game plan? How are you going to be able to offset the gains that some of your competitors have made? Another one that I see happening right now is sort of stakeholder capitalism. And that's the notion that it's not just investors and owners that a business should be about, delivering growth to, but their workforce, their customers, society in general. And what's our strategy now as top leadership to address this trend? I don't think it's going anywhere. And interestingly, an earlier guest of yours, Cheryl, mentioned the Edelman Trust Barometer. And one of the very interesting findings for me that came out of this year's Trust Barometer was that 68% of respondents said, and this is sort of the third trend that I'm keeping an eye on, that I expect CEOs to step in when government fails. And the recent Supreme Court ruling about mandatory vaccinations and so on is a strong indication that top leaders are going to have to take a stance and decide for their organizations what their policy is going to be on things like that. So I see those as three big things that we've got to help our leaders think about and get their arms around and devise strategies and tactics to handle. And yes, okay, we do need to be sympathetic. We do need to be empathetic. We do need to manage people in remote locations and all of that. But let's take it past that. And let's really think about some of the implications of what we just lived through.
So just diving into that pandemic dividends, that whole sort of where you're saying that some organizations absolutely boomed during the last couple of years,
Right.
nature of their business, or they were agile, whatever it is, they boomed. And you're saying that potentially could be our competitors, that you're saying that, or some competitive organizations. I guess what is the strategy of them playing that catch up again, rather than just looking at them and thinking, oh my goodness, they've done really well and we haven't. Sort of, what are you talking to companies about in terms of helping them, I guess, play that catch up if they've missed something?
Right. I mean, part of it, let's really think through what's really been going on. The Great Resignation, everyone points at, oh my God, it's so hard to find people, et cetera, et cetera. Well, what's happening out there is a lot of these folks that have resigned have started businesses. And some of them are going to be very, very successful. They're going to be introducing innovations and that companies can really leverage. So one of the ideas that I'm working with clients on is, let's identify these emerging organizations and figure out how to fold those into our strategy so that we can better compete.
Almost like incubator type sort of
Yeah,
businesses.
I mean, I think there's stuff like that can definitely be folded into a strategy to help a business compete and catch up with those that maybe took a sort of a big gain over the last couple of years. So if you're competing with the Zooms of the world, if you're competing with Amazon, if you're competing with, Uber Eats and that kind of stuff, here are some of the things that you're going to have to start to do if you're not already, in order to remain competitive.
And are we talking there a bit of a mindset shift, though, aren't we, in terms of how you view your own business, how you view your people, and how you, I guess, leverage that intel and that capability, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure, Julian. The thing is, the mindset is definitely a terrible thing to waste. So if we spend a lot of our time worrying about yesterday and what happened and oh my God, and we're victims and all that stuff that I see a lot of people still writing about and talking about, then I think we're missing the point. And the point is, if we've got that positive growth mindset, if we're looking at the world as one of abundance instead of scarcity, then one of the things that we've got to be able to do is look ahead and keep going forward and have a vision for where we want to be, articulate that vision, motivate our people to get excited about it, engage them, and then unleash them. And that's how we're going to win. That's how we're going to sustain our businesses. That's how we're going to grow.
And I guess it's what Con was talking about, is about engaging people, getting people to feel valued, and then they'll start to contribute. And actually, I think people forget how much insights is within their business.
Yeah.
And actually, if you utilize your people well and reward them well, and set up, whether it's incubator schemes that can start to create companies within companies, you'd be surprised how you can achieve far more. I mean, I know. I think was it Google sort of changed the way they did in terms of making meetings. You had to make a decision at the end of every meeting. If there's no decision maker in the room, then it's not a meeting. We don't happen, and it just exploded the innovation pipeline. And it's just creating different ways of working that can start to really go after this new ways of working or innovation, whatever it may be.
Yeah, for sure. I think the notion of being able to engage your people in such a way that they aren't part of the great resignation, but rather they're part of, let's see what happens next. When they get excited about being there, when they see themselves being successful within the vision that you've articulated, when you create a culture that allows for that kind of collaboration and growth and so on, then I think the world's your oyster. You've got the power times 100. You know what I mean? To be able to go out there and really, devastate the competition, if you will.
I touched on this with Cheryl really about the whole, communicating or get involved in societal issues, and you talk about how the expectation is for the CEO or the leader of the business to step up a bit to challenge potential government sort of guidelines in whatever they do. Again, how are you seeing that play out, and how do you see that sort of having an impact on a business in terms of them growing going forward?
Well, again, I think it starts with the vision, and then I think it needs to be socialized or institutionalized through follow-up. So it's one thing to articulate a vision and get people to see where you want to go. And then it's following up with the actions that are necessary to actually really hook them in so that they really feel like they're part of something special. That it's part of the human condition to want to be part of something bigger than oneself. And if we can deliver that as top leaders to our staffers, then we've got them for life. They're going to want to be part of this because it's so exciting. It's so compelling. They can be so successful by following this and achieving this vision. So it's really up to top leaders to say where we're going and then engage, certainly train them up and prepare them, and then unleash them. There's no place for micromanagement. It's got to be about getting people ready to lead and then let them lead. And I think you end up in some pretty great places when you do that as a top leadership team.
Well, it's that notion of, inspire people where you want to go, almost to get them all almost pointing towards the sun of your vision, and then, go get type of thing, enable them, give them the resource they need. Right. And you'd be surprised that there's a risk to that because they might do things you never even thought of, surprisingly. Right. They might create some amazing things.
Absolutely.
And if you and I've asked all the guests to sum up this year you'd like to see in one word for 2022, what would be from your perspective?
Well, I've got to say it's indispensable. That would be my one word. You want this. Here's our opportunity. I don't know what happens really beyond today, but we've got now, and let's stop lamenting about what just happened, and let's get on with what we've got to do to build these compelling businesses and keep them, exciting places to be and delivering impeccable products and services.
Yep, I wasn't surprised that you came up with indispensable. I would have been disappointed, Jim, if you'd not said it. It's been your mantra for certainly the last 12, 18 months I've known you. So, yeah.
Right.
Good. Well, thank you for coming on. Thank you for your sharing your wisdom and your thoughts and some key things there. So that's really good. Appreciate your time today, Jim.
Julian, thanks a lot. It's great to be part of your 100th episode, man. Congratulations. And again, cheers.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye then. Well, thank you for those who listen to the show. Would really appreciate you do rate and review the show. And if you want to know when episodes are released, then do subscribe. Also tell your friends and colleagues about the show. Would really appreciate that. And a big thank you to all my guests over the last 18 months who've come on the show, and especially to those who have come on today. Thank you very much. Goodbye.